Howdy, and welcome to the Petrus Development Show, where we discuss fundraising in the religious sector and how generosity and giving impacts both the organization and the donor. From campus ministries to high schools, from universities and faith-based nonprofits to Catholic parishes, we bring you stories, insights, and best practices that will inspire, educate, and inform you to go out and raise more money for your ministry and the kingdom. God bless, and thank you for joining us today.
Well, hello and welcome to the Petrus Development Show. My name is Rhen from Petrus Development, and I'm joined today with Petrus's owner and president, Mr. Andrew Robinson. Hello, Andrew.
Right on, Rhen. Happy to be here. It's New Year, ready to keep our podcast rolling again. We've been off for a little while, which I think we're going to talk about, but I'm back in studio, so to speak, and excited to talk with you.
Yeah, we've been on hiatus for a few months now. Do you want to tell us why we've had a little bit of a break?
I don't want to tell you why, but I guess I should. So October 25th, I was in a little accident. I injured my leg in a sparring incident in an MMA class. I was going up against a guy that was much bigger than me, and we went down awkwardly, and I shattered everything in my ankle, broke my fibula, ripped all the ligaments off the bones, and ended up having to go in November 2nd for surgery. They repaired put it all back together, and then they held it together with a titanium plate, 2 screws, a button, and some surgical wire in my ankle. So I have been off my ankle. It's been when this all happened, he said 3 months is recovery time, meaning no walking for 3 months, no driving for at least 6 weeks. And we survived that. Family of 6, kids 14 to 2, and it was not easy at times, not being able to walk, but made the best of it. Ended up having crutches, got a little leg scooter, and ended up getting this really cool leg crutch, which I mean, it saved me. I was able to take the kids to the park. Once I was able to drive, I could do that. So anyways, I'm recovering. This Friday, I should get clearance to walk again in a boot, and which is not Canadian for about. That really is a boot. And I should be able to be in my walking boot for about 2 weeks, and then back at it. So I can start. I've already started PT. I can start really rehabbing the muscles, the bones, the ligaments, tendons, all that, and hopefully soon be back playing basketball. And jury's still out on whether I'll be back doing MMA again. My wife was not a fan whenever I started, and became even less supportive when I injured myself and took myself out of commission for 3 months. So we'll see. We'll see how that all goes, TBD. But I am excited to be back walking again and being able to move on my own.
Yeah, not being able to drive, that would be a pretty difficult challenge, I think, especially with all the kids. But it sounds like pretty quick you'll be back up and moving, and we'll be happy to see you in front of that famous brick wall in your office again.
Yeah, that's right. I not being able to drive was because it was my right foot, so super inconvenient. My wife's a saint, and she kept everything moving. My oldest daughter is, she's a great student. She's a great kid, but that means she's involved in a lot of extracurriculars. She's involved at church, and so there was a lot of asking friends to drive and Cheryl driving, and I was just sitting at home wishing I could help. But I'm back now, back able to drive, and that's been a game changer. And be able to get back in my office and stand at my desk, my standing walking desk again with that brick wall. Right now, I am recording from our playroom, so you can see we've got some stuff on the wall, some books in the background, and I've got a kind of a little rig set up for the microphone and the camera. But yeah, I'm happy to be back.
Great. Well, we're here at the beginning of a new year, 2024. And as we get started with the new year, moving into January here, it's time to set goals for a lot of fundraisers. So we wanted to talk about that a little bit today and some of the different considerations if you are a fundraiser, if you are a director of a ministry who employs a fundraiser or doing fundraising just on your own, what are the types of goals you should be setting? How should you evaluate your fundraisers' activity and their effectiveness, and things surrounding that topic? So, Andrew, to get us started, in general, what are the most significant metrics that fundraisers should be tracking and setting goals for?
Great. Well, I appreciate the question, Rhen. And I think this is important for anybody listening, whether you're a director or a supervisor or you're the fundraiser, right? So, a lot of it, best goals, best metrics, all of that. At the end of the day, it is going to come down to motivation. And as a fundraiser, are you motivated to get out there and do the work? And sometimes that means doing things that are uncomfortable, like making phone calls, going on visits. Sometimes uncomfortable for other people are, logging database notes and, interpersonal or interoffice kind of strategic planning. But are you motivated to get out there and do it? And are you willing to do it when it's uncomfortable or when it's tedious? Right. So a lot of when we think of fundraising, a lot of our colleagues and a lot of people that are not familiar with fundraising automatically think, okay, well, you take people to coffee, you sit down, you ask them for gifts, right? Like that is classic fundraising 101, right? Well, the truth of the matter is that is part of it, certainly, but there's a lot that has to happen in the office, around the office, in between visits,
Right.
on your way to visits, on your way home from visits, all of that, that if you're not willing to do, then and it doesn't get done, then that's going to create problems. So like some of those tedious activities are, keeping up with the database, writing thank you notes, cleaning up addresses. Sometimes it's, doing mailings and planning for your appeals to go out. Things like that that's a big part of a fundraiser's job, not just getting out there and asking for gifts. Okay. So
Right.
that's part one is, um, are you motivated to do the stuff that's uncomfortable? And are you motivated enough to do the stuff that's tedious and time consuming in the quest for and in your mission to raise money to support your mission?
Right. Yep.
So I think that's a big part of just overall goal setting is where are you motivated and where does that motivation come from?
Great. So, are there specific activities that fundraisers should be setting goals for?
Yeah, so 100%. There are definitely metrics and goals that you should be looking at in terms of goal setting as a fundraiser. So, years ago, I read a book by, you're going to have to correct me if I get this wrong, but Chris McChesney, Sean Covey. He's the son of Stephen Covey, but it's Four Disciplines of Execution. And I'm sure this concept exists in other places. So, that was where I was first introduced to this concept of lead measures and lag measures. So lag measures are what most people think of when they think of goals for fundraising. How much money was raised? Did you meet your goals? And what the authors of this book and this concept say is lag measures come after the fact. They lag the activity, right? So if you're doing the activity, then ultimately how you're measured is the dollars that are raised. So those would be lag measures. The truth is that you're ultimately not in control of those lag measures to the degree that we think we are. What we are in control of, though, is the lead measures. So, lead measures come before, they are the antecedents to the lag measures, right? So, lead measures would be how many phone calls are you making? How many proposals are you putting out? How many donors are you seeing? How many mailings are you doing? How many new people are you adding to your database every month, every year? How many people are you asking for monthly gifts, for major gifts, for increased gifts, for renewal gifts? So those are lead measures because ultimately, if you are doing those lead measures, then you will come to the lag measures, which are the dollars raised, right? So when you think of activity and goals for a fundraiser, focus on the lead measures because that you can control. I can control as a fundraiser how many times I pick up the phone and dial somebody's number. I can control to some extent how many visits I go on. If I keep making phone calls, I will get more visits. And so focus on the lead measures in your activities and in your goals because that's controllable. It's not a bad thing to put a lag measure or two into somebody's goal, into their evaluation, how many dollars were raised, because we want that activity to produce fruit. But evaluation or goals or metrics plan that I've ever been part of or that I've encouraged other people to do is heavy on the lead measures, because the lag measures will come if they're hitting those goals.
Yeah, exactly. If you receive Petrus's Raise the Church e-newsletter, we had an article in there recently that broke down a couple of stories from some of our fundraisers about kind of that specific topic. One was a story of somebody who had made an ask of somebody. The donor said, "No, I can't do that right now," and then came back a couple years later and did make that gift. Another one was a story of making a big ask of a donor, and it took them 5 years to come back and say that they were going to make that gift, right? So it can be a long time horizon to see those dollars raised, but if you're doing that activity and maintaining those relationships, it's eventually going to come. So that's why it is important to track those lead measures in fundraising.
This conference is well worth the entire experience, especially for the faithful looking to build the body of Christ. That's what one ministry director said after attending the Petrus Development's Raise conference in 2023. A fundraising staff member from a different organization had this to say: "I have several years of experience fundraising, and I found the conference applicable to me. I also saw new to fundraising people getting a lot out of it too. There is literally something for everyone here." In 2024, Raise, the Catholic Fundraising Conference, will be even bigger and even better. Join us on the Riverwalk in San Antonio, Texas, June 24 through 26, 2024. Raise 24 will feature outstanding speakers, great networking opportunities, and an authentically Catholic conference experience. Registration is open now. Learn more at petrusdevelopment.com/raise24. That's petrusdevelopment.com/raise24.
Yeah, one of my favorite fundraising stories, my first boss when I was at St. Mary's at Texas A&M, he had a couple that we knew had tremendous capacity, but they had never really supported at a significant level. And so every year he would go and spend time with them and get in front of them and invite them to mass and do all the things that are cultivating. And every year he would ask for a slightly larger gift for a specific project that he knew that they were passionate about. So the first gift they've ever made was $500. Then it became $5,000. Then it became $25,000. Then it became $125,000. Then it became $1 million. And that wouldn't have happened if he had not been practicing those good cultivation, for one, but those lead measures of going to see people and doing and getting in front of them and cultivating them for those larger gifts down the road.
Great. So maybe we should come back to address this quick, is if we're measuring a fundraiser based on the number of people they're contacting, the number of people they're meeting and making asks of, why in sales you would pay often a percentage, a commission. If the salesman makes $1 million in sales, they get X percent as their commission, as their payment for that.
Right.
Why can't we do something like that in fundraising? If you raise $1 million, you get 5% of that, say.
So that's a good question. So in sales, it's kind of an assumed understanding that if you sell something to somebody, they will be receiving a benefit, a direct benefit in return, right? If they buy more books from you, they will be getting those books. If they buy more cars from you, they will be getting cars. And so salesmen and sales tactics, kind of classic sales tactics, are kind of understood and almost allowed to go a little bit further into the like those high pressure zones of sales. And that's because there's a direct benefit to the receiver. In fundraising, there is a benefit to the donor, but it's not something where if they give you $100, they get something in return, right? They are giving that because they believe in the mission. Motivations are kind of all over the place. Some give for true altruism, some give for recognition, some give because they had a personal experience. But we don't want to encourage our fundraisers to go down that same road of high pressure sales techniques that you would see in car sales and in traditional sales roles. And so for that reason, I think that there is just a desire on the part of the profession. So the Association of Fundraising Professionals is the first group and probably the primary group that ever put out a donor bill of rights, and included in that donor bill of rights, or included in some of their other materials are we don't pay commissions to our fundraisers. And the reason they did that is not because they wanted to make it harder to hire fundraisers. They wanted to make it more difficult and less advantageous for fundraisers to engage in those high pressure sales techniques that salesmen and saleswomen do. And so I think that it's a protection of the industry. It's a protection of that relationship that is, fundraiser and donor. And it's a protection of that donor gives to the organization because they feel called to, and they are going to see a benefit for the organization and for the mission, not necessarily for themselves. And so, I think you wrap all that together, and that presents us with a scenario that commission-based fundraising is just a dangerous road that I think the industry wants to stay out of and avoid. And truthfully, I've been in fundraising for close to 20 years, and I probably would have engaged in some tactics and some strategies that would have not been in the best benefit of the donor had I known that I was going to receive a commission on those gifts. And so I think, just from my own personal standpoint, I believe that you hire good fundraisers, you pay them a good salary, and then you can build in some incentives for activity based merit incentives. But staying off of direct commission, I think, is a really good move for the industry as well as the fundraisers and ultimately for the donors.
Exactly. So let's go back to some of those specific goals that we're setting for this coming year. If you're looking at your fundraising efforts for 2024 or any given year, let's look at, say, the number of people you want to meet face to face. What is a realistic goal or metric that we should be setting for ourselves on that particular metric?
Good question. So, what is a good goal for donor visits face to face?
Right.
I have always operated in a space of, if I can get in front of 15 to 20 individuals per month over the course of the year, then I will ultimately see those lag measures that we want to see: dollars raised, proposals issued, that will sustain the organization. So 15 to 20 is a really good goal. I would say that in 2020, the rules of what is a face-to-face visit, they changed because people didn't want to go out and see individuals, and on the flip side, donors didn't want people in their homes asking them for gifts. And so there's been a dramatic increase in the acceptance of phone calls and video based meetings and solicitations. And I still am a firm believer, maybe it's just being kind of old school and thinking that face to face is better, but I think that a face to face visit is always going to bear more fruit. There's less of a time constraint, there's kind of more freedom to observe things in the room and observe your surroundings that will ultimately lead to better relationships. There's more time for kind of small talk and chit chat than there is on a Zoom call. But in the world of post-COVID fundraising, Zoom calls and video calls and phone calls can be very effective. So to kind of boil all that down, 15 to 20 face-to-face and or video calls with intentional stated purpose of cultivating your donors or asking for a gift is a very reasonable. It's a stretch. You got to stay busy. You got to be active. You got to make those phone calls. But if you can get that as your goal monthly and annually, then you will raise more money and you will hit your goals every year.
Right. And a ratio that I've heard from other fundraisers and what I found to be true for myself as a fundraiser is if you contact 10 people, you get on average 2.5 to 3 meetings out of those 10 contacts. So if you're looking for 20 in a month, you got to multiply that by 3 to 4 times as many phone calls to make those happen. So it's got to be something that happens every day.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's the ratio that I've always seen. 10 calls equals 3 visits equals 1 sale or 1 gift. And so if you know that you want to ask for a certain amount for that year, you want to make a certain number of solicitations, then your activity, again, those lead measures, your activity has to be significantly higher than the number of visits, because not everybody is going to say yes to your visit.
Maybe that brings us to another question: is if you're making 15 to 20 visits per month, how many of those do you think are asks, or how many visits does it take to get to an ask with an average donor?
That's a great question. So there's 2 questions in there. How many of your 20 visits a month should be solicitations? And we'll tackle that one first. So there's 4 types of visits that you can be going on as a fundraiser. There's your discovery visit, which is where you're meeting somebody for the first time and assessing whether they want to be a major donor to your organization. There's cultivation, which is where you're moving the relationship along the donor continuum from ignorance to ultimately ownership. There's solicitation, which is where you are asking, hey, Mr. Hain, I know you care passionately about this organization. Would you consider a gift of $10,000 this year to help us and accomplish our mission at a greater degree? And then there is stewardship. So stewardship is, Mr. Hain, you have been a loyal supporter of ours. I just wanted to take you out for coffee and thank you for your gifts over the years. So if you're looking at those 4 types of visits, only one of them is asking for a gift, right? The other 3 are critically important, though, to sustaining long-term development activity at your organization. So it doesn't always work out to a quarter in each of those buckets. But if you think in your mind, if I can do 20 visits this month and roughly 5 of those are going to be solicitations, that means the other 15 need to be discovery. I need to be meeting new people. Cultivation, I need to be deepening my relationship with my existing donors. And stewardship, I need to be thanking donors for their support. So I think that's how I always think of how do you kind of ratio out your 15 to 20 visits per month, is you look at those 4 buckets of discovery, cultivation, solicitation, and stewardship. Your second question is kind of how many visits does it take to get to an ask? The rule here is it depends, right? Some donors, they call and they say, hey, my daughter went through your campus ministry. I know I've never supported before, but she had a life-changing experience and I want to meet with you and talk about how I can make a gift to support it. Well, we're not going to go on that visit and treat it as a true discovery and not make an ask, right? They've set us up for, I want to support your organization and I want to know how specifically. So that might be one visit and we're laying out a sort of some options or even a proposal for them to give. But like in the case of my story earlier and my boss who, it took 5 years to get to $1 million gift. Well, there were a lot of cultivation visits, and even that $5,000 ask in a way was it was a solicitation, but it was a cultivation ultimately towards that $1 million ask $1 million gift that they made down the road. So, I would say that the number of visits that it takes to get to a solicitation are as many as you need. In some cases, it's 1, and in some cases, it's 15 to 20. But developing true relationships with our donors, with our benefactors, and being mindful of their philanthropic goals is ultimately what's going to set us up as a fundraiser for better success on the whole, as fundraisers that are asking a lot of people for support, as opposed to what do I need to do to get a gift from this person individually right now.
So I want to look at a couple kind of examples of fundraising offices and setting those goals for the year, right? At Petrus, we get asked, pretty frequently, what kind of goals should I be setting for this year? And then every organization is in a little bit different situation. So I want to start with, if you're in an established fundraising program, it's been going for a few years, you've got some donors, you got a good sized list. And then after that, I want to come back and talk about if you're in a brand new fundraising program or if you're just starting fundraising, because the goals look a little bit different depending where you are there. So in an established fundraising program, what are some of the goals kind of specifically? You said monthly visits, probably 15 to 20. And I would probably track that monthly, right? Not just average out over the year. What other goals should you be thinking about in an established program?
So, and we're talking about lead measures, you really want to focus on number of visits. 15 to 20 per month is a good goal for an individual fundraiser. Monthly donors. I think that, growing up in an established fundraising office, I never had a goal of less than 50 new monthly donors over the course of the year. As the monthly giving program grew, that number of goals grew, but 50 monthly donors is at least a target for an established fundraising office. Then I think you want to start looking at the number of solicitations. And when you're in an established fundraising office, you should really look at what are your tiered levels for solicitations. So when you're just getting started out, I don't know that I said that right. When you're just starting out, then oftentimes you don't know kind of what your donor pool looks like. But once you have an established fundraising office and you have a pipeline, you have an annual fund that's giving you, new donors, you have a database, then it's totally reasonable for you to set goals of X number of solicitations at $5,000 plus X number of solicitations at $10,000 plus X number of solicitations at $100,000 plus X number of solicitations at $1 million. And oftentimes it's in that kind of transitional period where a development office is going from, they started, now they're doing pretty well, and now we want them to kind of click the dial and go push themselves a little bit harder, right? And so they've never had a goal, have never had a gift of $1 million, and they never really thought about that. And at the beginning of the year, and sometimes when I'm working with them, I say, all right, what if we set a goal that we're going to ask somebody for $1 million this year? Then you can oftentimes see their eyes get really big and say, oh, we've never done that before, Andrew. That makes us a little nervous. Say, well, yeah, it should make you nervous. It should make you uncomfortable. But as you grow, now you have people that have been making those gifts that we can identify their capacity. And if we don't know who that person is right now, or we don't know who those 2 or 3 people are that we're going to kind of begin that process, then now is a good time to start. So, number of visits, number of monthly donors, number of solicitations at different levels. And then I think, in terms of kind of a lag measure that is dollars raised, I think it's reasonable to set a goal of increasing your dollars raised year to year. In an established program that's going, you're going to be looking at most times of somewhere in the 10 to 25% increase dollars raised this year versus dollars raised in the past year. And I think that's reasonable. You want to look at, there's some data that you can kind of use to say, is that reasonable? Is that too high? Is that too low? But established fundraising offices, I think, can set a goal of somewhere around 10 to 25% increased dollars raised. Now, kind of going back down the list and going to the other side of a new fundraising office that doesn't have a database, that doesn't have a strong annual fund, your goals are going to be a little bit different, right? 15 to 20 visits per month when you have no database and no pipeline of donors is going to be challenging, right? So, but that means that you set goals that you are still going to push you in the visits category. Maybe you do set a 15 visit goal per month over the course of the year, and that we don't know who those people are, but we're going to find them, and we're going to do a lot more discovery visits this year than anything else because we just don't know who those people are. In solicitations, or let's stay in order, in monthly gifts, then I think still setting a goal for new monthly donors is a good goal for a new office. I'll tell you a quick story going back to my earlier example of working at St. Mary's at Texas A&M. When we had a goal of 50 new monthly donors, and we had maybe at that time probably 150 to 200 monthly donors total, it was tough to get to that 50, but we knew that 50 every year we were going to hit it. And so there were multiple years, like that last 2 weeks leading up to the end of we were on a fiscal year basis. So the end of our sort of goal term, I mean, we were calling and making a really concerted effort to get new monthly donors because we really wanted to hit that 50. And then, that was, 15 years ago. Now they have over 1,500 monthly donors, bringing over $1 million a year. But if we hadn't had those 50 new monthlies per year in the beginning, who knows that we would have grown at that rate. So new monthly donors, number of solicitations, you still want to set goals. But if you're in a brand new office starting out, you might not have $1 million tier. Your top tier might be 25,000 or 100,000, but you want to set goals within each tier. And then dollars raised, new fundraising offices, when you go from not doing any fundraising to having a concerted and a disciplined plan for fundraising, you're going to see increases a lot faster and at a higher rate. So you might be looking at 100% increase over last year's dollars raised in a new fundraising office. In years 2, 3, and 4, you might be looking at a 50% year over year increase. And then eventually you're going to level out at that 10 to 25%. But early days, you can see a lot of fruit from having a good plan, from people that haven't been asked, that are ready, and just from new motivation and new energy.
Yeah, I love that. The the one that stands out to me there is asking for gifts at the different tiers, right? And I remember, when I started out in fundraising, the goal was just to find anybody to ask for give us anything, right?
Yeah.
And when I kind of made that switch to, all right, now I'm looking for this many people at 25K, this many people at 100K. The 100K felt impossible. Like, who's got all that money laying around? These have to be like superstar athletes or whatnot. And later on in my career, after I closed a number of those size gifts, they weren't those superstar athletes. They were
Right.
people who lived just normal everyday lives, had saved and had built some wealth, and were happy to make that size of gift to see that impact happening at our ministry. But it wasn't as unachievable as it felt when I first started. So there
And
was a
setting
great
the
goal.
goal that is, in your mind, you think, oh my gosh, that's unachievable. But then putting that as a goal, then you have really kind of 12 months to strategize about it, to identify the right people, to do the cultivation, and then ultimately to make that solicitation, put that proposal in front of them. And if you don't, if you're not intentional about doing that, then you could spend those 12 months saying, we're fine with $5,000 gifts all day long, and never push yourself to grow and see those ultimately the lag measure of dollars raised increased.
That's exactly right. I want to come back to one point that you didn't mention, that I work with a lot of ministries that are just starting out in fundraising. And one they always ask about is, hey, should we just be spending a lot of time writing grants? Because those are free, easy money. How many grants should a ministry be applying for as they get started out?
So this is a really good question, and a lot of board members and a lot of kind of executive directors think of fundraising as grant writing, right? Because
Right.
that's what they hear about, that's what's familiar, that's what the zoo gets, that's what the museum gets. In truth, grants are really difficult if you don't have a strong and a historical grant writing program. Um, but I think that it's a good and it's a worthwhile exercise to start identifying foundations that can make grants, and to start that process of what does it mean to actually write a grant for an organization. So a good goal for a young fundraising program is really to identify and to submit somewhere between 2 to 4 grants in a year. And part of that is going to depend on deadlines, right? Grants, foundations don't work like donors do. They might say, you submit your grants November 30th every year, and we review them. And then if we approve you, then you get the money. If we deny you, then you can't come back until November 30th next year. So if you miss a deadline, that might not be one that you can ask for in this year. But instituting that practice of identifying and soliciting, writing those grants is good. Just don't expect a lot of return initially as you start that process.
Right, exactly. I've seen some more government adjacent organizations like schools do really well with grants early on, but other ministries. I have somebody that I know who had hired a full-time grant writer, spent two full years writing grants for their organization, and didn't get their first one accepted until after she had left at the end of the second year. And so they spent six figures on salary and benefits for 2 years to get a $10,000 grant after
Yeah.
2 years. So it's a hard thing to see a lot of revenue come from. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Is your organization looking to construct a new building, add more staff, or grow your programming with a capital campaign? Let Petrus Development guide you through this transformative journey. As a Teach to Fish organization, we empower you not only for today, but for a sustainable future. Our services include comprehensive campaign preparation and management. We'll craft your campaign's identity, plan events, and design compelling materials. Plus, we assist with major gift solicitations, identifying key donors, and coaching your team for success. But it doesn't stop there. We'll help you wrap up your campaign seamlessly, ensuring pledge fulfillment and effective stewardship. We'll even guide your transition into an increased annual fund, ensuring your success doesn't just end with the campaign. At Petrus Development, we're not just consultants. We're partners in your mission. Let's create something extraordinary together. Are you ready to make your dreams a reality? Sign up for a free 30-minute consultation to explore how Petrus Development's campaign services can elevate your organization. Discover the difference at petrusdevelopment.com/campaign. Your dream of impact awaits. Let's make it a reality together. Visit petrusdevelopment.com/campaign.
great. So as we wrap up here, thinking about the fundraisers out there, how can you go about goal setting, maybe from a career perspective, a longer term perspective, personally?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, when I was just a little backstory, when I was 33, when I turned 33, I had this moment where I thought, wow, Jesus was 33 when he started his ministry, true ministry on earth. Maybe I need to, get my rear in gear and start looking at some long-term goals. And so I went through and I set a lot of goals that I wanted to hit before I turned 40. And I hit some of them, didn't hit all of them, but it was really powerful just in terms of looking at what um, where I wanted to sort of see different aspects of my life advance to in those 7 years. And every year I would go and I would track them and I would say, how did I do on these goals? And so from a career standpoint, it really did help me because I knew I wanted to be in fundraising, but another goal of mine was to own a business. And so I was able to, fortunately, by the grace of God, be able to pair those my love of fundraising and entrepreneurship into ultimately taking over and running Petrus Development. So that was a goal of mine that I wouldn't have necessarily pursued in the same way if I hadn't identified those as being passions and goals of mine earlier on in my life. So I think from a fundraising standpoint, or from a fundraiser standpoint, looking at what are you passionate about and what do you want to do long term in your career as a fundraiser, I think is a really helpful exercise. And that might mean for somebody who's in an annual fund role right now at a Catholic high school, perhaps is listening to this. Well, a long term goal of yours might be, I want to be the director of advancement at a university someday, or it might mean that I want to be an executive director of a nonprofit someday, or it might mean I want to be entrepreneurial and start a business. But if you kind of think about that, what brings joy and passion, and what are good targets for you down the road, then as opportunities come up, or as you're looking at, do I my boss just offered me a promotion to take on this new responsibility. I don't know if I want to do it because that probably means committing here for a couple more years. Maybe that's what you want to do, and maybe you think, actually, this is really served me well, this role right now, but long term, I know this is where I want to be, and so you just are more intentional about decisions and discernment. So goal setting from a career standpoint for a young, a mid-level, and even an advanced fundraiser, I think can be really powerful and impactful for you as you make those decisions and as you identify kind of where do you want to end up someday, and then looking at the rungs on the ladder to get you there in a strategic way, I think is going to serve you well.
Excellent. Well, if you're looking for some resources on how to set goals, the types of goals to set, or if you or somebody on your team, a fundraiser on your team, is looking at setting up an incentive plan, we have a sample fundraising incentive plan available for free for download on the Petrus website. If you go to petrusdevelopment.com/134, this is episode 134 of the Petrus Development Show, petrusdevelopment.com/134, you'll be able to access that free spreadsheet, that download, and that'll help you set some goals and see in general what other fundraisers use for setting those metrics and for how they use it for an incentive plan.
Right on.
Before we go, quick announcement. This week, the winter cohort registration for our basic online advancement training BOAT program that Petrus hosts. It's a 10-week program that helps brand new fundraisers or get oriented into fundraising, or helps organizations who are just starting out in fundraising get up to speed and get moving. It's a 10-week program that starts this next week, the week of January 22nd, 2024, and registration closes this week on the 17th of January, Wednesday. You can visit petrusdevelopment.com/boat to learn more about that program.
And we had two really killer cohorts in the fall for the boat. That was our inaugural kind of boat voyage, right, so to speak.
Right.
But we had two really great cohorts who were engaged. They got a lot out of it, and it was great to see kind of the diversity of where they were coming from. Like you said, there were some people that were brand new to fundraising, but then there were also people who had been in fundraising but were new in a new role, maybe within their organization or a new organization, and so they were able to kind of use that 10 weeks to orient themselves to kind of a more broad look at fundraising, and then identify what their strengths and weaknesses were moving into a new role. So it doesn't have to be brand new. It can be, used as a training tool, or, leveling up for anybody.
Exactly. We say BOAT kind of provides the blueprint for a sustainable fundraising program. So it gives you a view at the whole spectrum of activities in fundraising, and it really kind of zooms in on those things that are most important early on: the vision, the communications, case for support, database, and really digs into those deeply. And so, yeah, we had all types of organizations in our fall cohort. It's from schools to campus ministries, different kind of miscellaneous organizations, right? Some that were service and aid organizations, some women's health organizations, kind of the full spectrum. So it was pretty cool to see all those organizations get moving with fundraising and training in new fundraisers. And some of them were just starting out with their first fundraising efforts ever. So great to see that progress happening.
Yeah, it was great. And I encourage anybody, if you're thinking about how can you level up or how can you help somebody on your team to learn the basics of fundraising in a fun environment, in a safe environment, in a kind of in a space where they're going to meet new people, build their network, then I would definitely encourage you to check out the Petrus boat.
Great. Again, that's petrusdevelopment.com/boat. And final announcement, if you, dear listener, have a question that you would like to hear Andrew answer on the podcast, you can send it in to podcast@petrusdevelopment.com and it may be featured on a future episode.
What?
You can also hit us up on Instagram or LinkedIn, anywhere that you find Petrus Development, and send us questions there.
Cool. Right on. It's been
Great.
fun, Rhen.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today, Andrew. And we'll look forward to getting back on a more regular schedule of the Petrus Development Show. And we'll see you again in a couple of weeks.
Right on. Sounds good. Thanks, Rhen.
I'm so glad that you could join us for this episode of the Petrus Development Show. Do you know anybody whose ministry needs to take their fundraising to the next level? Please pass along the show to them. And if you haven't already, take a minute and do 3 things. Subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. If you like the show, give us a 5-star rating and leave us a review. And check out our website, petrusdevelopment.com. Your ministry and the kingdom need good people doing great development work, and your donors receive just as much benefit from giving as your organization does from receiving. And as it says in Luke 5, cast your nets out into the deep. Be bold and the Lord will provide. God bless, and we'll see you next time.